Imagine walking into a room with 7 other people. You've never met them before. A researcher stands at the front and gives everyone a simple task. On a screen, he shows 1 line on the left and 3 lines on the right. Your job is to say which line on the right is the same length as the line on the left. The answer is obvious. So obvious that a child could get it right. One by one, the people in the room give their answers. The first person says the wrong line. The second person says the same wrong line. The third agrees. Then the fourth. Then the fifth. Then the sixth. Every single person gives an answer that is clearly incorrect. Now it's your turn. You can see the correct answer with your own eyes. There is no ambiguity, no trick, no hidden information. The line lengths are obviously different. So, what would you do? Most people confidently say they would speak up. They imagine themselves laughing at the group and giving the correct answer without hesitation. After all, why would anyone deny something they can clearly see? But when psychologist Solomon Asch conducted this experiment in the 1950s, something astonishing happened. A large number of participants abandoned their own judgment and agreed with the group's wrong answer. Not because they were confused, not because they couldn't see, but because everyone else was saying the same thing. Think about how disturbing that is for a moment. People were willing to doubt their own eyes simply to avoid standing alone. And that raises a question that is far more uncomfortable than the experiment itself. How much of what we believe is actually our own belief? Most of us like to think of ourselves as independent thinkers. We believe our opinions are carefully reasoned, our decisions are personal, and our judgments are objective. But human beings evolved in tribes, not in isolation. For most of history, survival depended on belonging to a group. Being rejected by the tribe could mean losing protection, resources, and sometimes even your life. As a result, our brains became incredibly sensitive to social approval, and that sensitivity never disappeared. It's still with us every day. You see it when people laugh at jokes they don't find funny, when students pretend to understand something they don't understand, when employees stay silent in meetings even though they know a decision is wrong, when millions of people repeat opinions they never seriously examined. The pressure to fit in is often invisible, which makes it even more powerful. Most conformity doesn't happen because someone threatens us. It happens because we fear the subtle discomfort of being different. We fear the awkward silence after disagreeing. We fear being judged, excluded, or labeled as strange. Sometimes we don't even realize we're changing our behavior. We simply begin moving with the crowd. And once a crowd starts moving in a particular direction, something fascinating happens. Each person becomes evidence for the next person. If 10 people believe something, it feels more credible. If 1,000 people believe it, it feels important. If millions believe it, it can start feeling undeniable. But popularity and truth are not the same thing. History proves this repeatedly. There were times when entire societies believed things that were catastrophically wrong, financial bubbles that seemed unstoppable, moral panics that destroyed innocent lives, political movements that gained enormous support before leading to disaster. In each case, many individuals privately had doubts, yet publicly went along with the crowd. Why? Because standing alone is psychologically expensive. Imagine being the only person in a room who disagrees. Even if you're right, your heart rate rises. You become more self-conscious. You start wondering whether you're missing something. The human brain interprets social disagreement almost like a threat. That is why conformity can feel so natural. It reduces tension. It creates belonging. It protects us from rejection. And in many situations, following the group is actually useful. If everyone in a city is running away from a fire, you should probably run too. If experienced people warn you about a danger, listening can be wise. The problem is that the same instinct that helps us survive can also make us abandon our own judgment. This becomes especially dangerous when the crowd is confidently wrong. Social media has amplified this effect dramatically. Today, people can see the opinions of thousands or millions of others instantly. A viewpoint can appear overwhelmingly popular within hours. Trends spread at incredible speed. Outrage spreads even faster. And because humans naturally look to others when deciding what to think, Online crowds can shape beliefs in ways we barely notice. Sometimes people share information because they know it's true. Sometimes they share it because everyone else is sharing it. Those are very different things. What makes the asch experiment so powerful is not that people followed the crowd, it's that they did so while privately knowing the crowd was wrong. Many participants later admitted they had seen the correct answer, but felt uncomfortable disagreeing with the group. In other words, conformity didn't erase their perception, it overpowered their willingness to express it. And that may be one of the most important psychological lessons of all. The greatest danger is not always that people can't see the truth. Sometimes the greatest danger is that they can see it and still remain silent. Because once enough people stay silent, the illusion grows stronger. Everyone looks around, sees apparent agreement, and assumes they are the only one with doubts. The crowd appears unanimous, even when many individuals secretly disagree. Psychologists call this pluralistic ignorance. Everyone thinks everyone else believes something, so everyone pretends to believe it too. And suddenly a false consensus is born, which leads to an even more unsettling question. If an entire room can convince people to doubt their own eyes, what can an entire society convince people to doubt? That is where the story becomes much darker, because in the next part, we'll explore why the human brain is so vulnerable to group pressure, why belonging often becomes more important than being right, and how this ancient survival instinct can quietly shape the decisions, beliefs, and behaviors of millions of people without them ever realizing it. To understand why people follow the crowd, even when the crowd is clearly wrong, we need to look far deeper than social pressure. The real answer is hidden inside the human brain itself. Long before modern cities, smartphones, and social media existed, our ancestors lived in small tribes where survival depended almost entirely on belonging. Alone, a human being was vulnerable. A single person could struggle to find food, defend against predators, or survive harsh environments. But together, a tribe could accomplish what no individual could do alone. Over thousands of generations, this reality shaped the human mind. Our brains evolved to treat social acceptance as something incredibly valuable and social rejection as something incredibly dangerous. This ancient survival mechanism still exists today, even though the world around us has changed dramatically. Being excluded from a group no longer means facing wild animals or starvation, yet our brains often react as if it does. Studies have shown that social rejection activates many of the same regions of the brain associated with physical pain. In other words, being excluded literally hurts. This helps explain why people often go to extraordinary lengths to avoid standing out. The fear isn't always conscious. Most people don't wake up thinking, "I need everyone to approve of me today." Instead, the desire for acceptance quietly influences behavior from the background. It shapes what we say, what we wear, what opinions we express, and sometimes even what we believe. This is why conformity can be so powerful. Following the crowd often feels safer than questioning it. Imagine being the only person in a room who disagrees with everyone else. Even if you know you're right, you begin feeling pressure. You wonder if you're missing information. You question your own judgment. You become aware that speaking up could create conflict. The simplest solution is often to stay quiet or agree with the majority. The immediate reward is comfort. The immediate cost of disagreement disappears. But what feels comfortable in the moment can sometimes lead people far away from the truth. Psychologists have spent decades studying this phenomenon, and their findings reveal something deeply unsettling. Human beings are not nearly as independent as they like to believe. Much of what we think and do is influenced by the people around us. We constantly look to others for cues about what is normal, acceptable, and correct. This process happens automatically. When we enter a new situation, we observe the behavior of others before deciding how to act ourselves. Most of the time, this is useful. It helps us navigate unfamiliar environments. But it also creates opportunities for massive errors when the group itself is mistaken. One reason this happens is because people often assume that if many others believe something, there must be a good reason for it. This mental shortcut saves time and energy. Instead of investigating every claim personally, we rely on the judgments of the group. In many situations, this strategy works surprisingly well, but it becomes dangerous when large numbers of people are all making the same mistake. Once a belief gains enough momentum, its popularity starts being mistaken for evidence. People stop asking whether something is true and start assuming it must be true because so many others believe it. History provides countless examples of this phenomenon. Entire populations have embraced false ideas, supported disastrous decisions, and participated in harmful movements simply because everyone around them appeared to be doing the same thing. Looking back, these moments often seem obvious. We wonder how so many people could have been wrong at once. But from the inside, things feel very different. Individuals rarely see themselves as blindly following the crowd. They see themselves as making reasonable decisions based on the information available to them. The influence of conformity is most powerful when people don't realize it is happening. Another reason people follow the crowd is because disagreement carries risks. Every group has unwritten rules. Some opinions are rewarded, while others are discouraged. People quickly learn which beliefs gain approval and which invite criticism. Over time, many individuals begin filtering their thoughts before expressing them. They hide doubts. They soften disagreements. They tell themselves it isn't worth the trouble. The result is a dangerous illusion. Everyone appears to agree, even when many people secretly have reservations. This creates a phenomenon known as pluralistic ignorance. Imagine a room full of people who privately doubt something but assume everyone else believes it. Because nobody wants to stand out, nobody speaks up. The silence convinces each person that they are alone in their doubts. As a result, everyone continues pretending. The belief appears stronger than it actually is. The crowd gains power, not because everyone genuinely agrees, but because everyone assumes everyone else agrees. What makes this especially dangerous is that once a false consensus forms, it becomes self-reinforcing. Every person who remains silent strengthens the illusion. Every person who publicly agrees adds another layer of credibility. Soon, even individuals who once questioned the belief begin accepting it. The crowd creates its own reality, and the larger the crowd becomes, the harder it feels to resist. Modern technology has amplified this process to an unprecedented degree. Social media platforms expose people to enormous amounts of social information every day. Likes, shares, comments, trends, and viral posts constantly signal what the crowd appears to believe. When millions of people seem to support an idea, many individuals instinctively assume there must be truth behind it. Yet popularity can spread much faster than accuracy. An idea doesn't need to be correct to go viral. It only needs to be emotionally compelling. This creates an environment where crowd behavior can influence beliefs at extraordinary speed. Perhaps the most unsettling realization is that conformity doesn't always require direct pressure. Nobody has to threaten you. Nobody has to force you. Often, simply knowing what the majority thinks is enough. Human beings are social creatures. We naturally want harmony. We naturally want belonging. And because of that, we often underestimate how much the opinions of others shape our own. But there is an even darker side to conformity. Following the crowd doesn't just influence opinions. Under the right conditions, it can influence morality itself. People can begin accepting actions they once considered unacceptable, simply because those actions become normalized within a group. History shows that ordinary individuals are capable of extraordinary behavior when surrounded by enough social reinforcement. The crowd doesn't merely tell people what to think. Sometimes it tells them what is right and wrong. And that raises a chilling question. If belonging is powerful enough to make people doubt their own eyes, what happens when an entire society starts moving in the wrong direction? What happens when conformity becomes stronger than conscience? Because some of the most devastating events in human history began not with evil individuals acting alone, but with millions of ordinary people choosing to follow the crowd. Most people assume that following the crowd only influences small decisions. They imagine conformity affecting harmless things like fashion trends, popular opinions, or everyday social behavior. But history tells a much darker story. Under the right conditions, the same psychological forces that make someone agree with a group about a simple line experiment can influence decisions that change nations, destroy lives, and reshape history itself. The uncomfortable truth is that conformity doesn't stop at opinions. If left unchecked, it can reach morality, judgment, and even a person's sense of right and wrong. One of the most frightening aspects of human psychology is how quickly abnormal behavior can begin to feel normal. Imagine walking into a room where everyone is doing something strange. At first, you notice it immediately. It feels wrong, unnatural. But if you remain in that environment long enough, something changes. Your brain starts adapting. The unusual becomes familiar. The familiar becomes acceptable. Eventually, what once shocked you barely captures your attention at all. This process is known as normalization, and it is one of the most powerful psychological forces in existence. History is filled with examples of societies slowly accepting ideas that would have seemed outrageous only a few years earlier. The people living through these moments rarely recognized what was happening. Change occurred gradually. Each step seemed small compared to the one before it. Individuals adjusted little by little until they found themselves supporting things they once would have strongly opposed. Looking back, it seems impossible. But from the inside, the transition often felt completely natural. This happens because people rarely compare today's situation to where they originally started. Instead, they compare it to yesterday. If yesterday's behavior becomes the new standard, today's slightly more extreme behavior feels reasonable by comparison. The crowd moves one step forward, then another, then another. By the time anyone notices how far things have gone, the destination is already in sight. One famous example of this tendency comes from financial markets. Throughout history, economic bubbles have followed remarkably similar patterns. Prices begin rising. People become excited. More people join in because everyone else seems to be making money. Doubts start disappearing. Warnings are ignored. Skeptics are mocked. As the crowd grows larger, the belief becomes stronger. Eventually, people stop asking whether prices make sense. They simply assume the crowd must know something they don't. Then reality arrives. The bubble bursts. And suddenly, everyone wonders how so many intelligent people could have been so wrong. The answer is not stupidity. The answer is conformity. The crowd created a sense of certainty that overwhelmed individual judgment. But financial bubbles are only one example. Social media has created entirely new forms of herd behavior. Today, millions of people can witness the same event simultaneously and react together within seconds. A single opinion can spread across the world before anyone has time to verify whether it is true. Online outrage can grow into a massive movement overnight. Entire reputations can be destroyed before facts are fully understood. What makes this phenomenon especially dangerous is that people often mistake popularity for accuracy. When thousands of comments agree with a particular viewpoint, it feels convincing. When millions of people share the same belief, it feels almost undeniable. Yet the number of people who believe something has never been a reliable measure of whether it is true. Throughout history, large groups have been wrong countless times, sometimes disastrously wrong. And yet every generation somehow convinces itself that its own crowd is different, that its own beliefs are immune from error, that its own consensus reflects reality. This confidence is precisely what makes herd mentality so dangerous. The crowd rarely announces that it is wrong. In fact, the crowd is usually most confident when it is making its biggest mistakes. This brings us to one of the darkest concepts in psychology, groupthink. Groupthink occurs when the desire for harmony becomes stronger than the desire for truth. Members of a group become so focused on maintaining agreement that critical thinking begins to disappear. People stop raising concerns. They avoid asking difficult questions. Doubt becomes uncomfortable. Disagreement feels disloyal. As a result, bad decisions go unchallenged. The group starts believing its own assumptions. warnings are dismissed, alternative perspectives are ignored. And because everyone appears confident, each individual becomes even more confident as well. It creates a dangerous feedback loop where certainty grows stronger while accuracy grows weaker. Some of history's worst disasters have been linked to this exact process, not because people lacked intelligence, but because they lacked opposition. Nobody wanted to be the person who challenged the group. Nobody wanted to risk standing alone. The desire for social harmony became more powerful than the desire for truth. Perhaps the most disturbing lesson is that the crowd often rewards conformity and punishes independence. The person who follows the majority receives approval. They fit in. They avoid conflict. The person who questions the group risks criticism, rejection, and isolation. Even when they are correct, the immediate experience can be unpleasant. This creates a powerful incentive structure. Following the crowd feels safe. Questioning the crowd feels risky. And because human beings naturally avoid risk, many choose comfort over truth without even realizing it. Yet every major breakthrough in history began with someone refusing to follow the crowd. Every scientific discovery that challenged conventional wisdom, every social reform that confronted injustice, every important truth that contradicted popular belief. At some point, someone had to stand apart from the majority and say, "I think we're wrong." That is much harder than it sounds. Standing against a crowd requires more than intelligence, it requires courage. The courage to trust your own observations when everyone else disagrees. The courage to tolerate uncertainty. The courage to risk social disapproval. And perhaps most importantly, the courage to accept that being alone does not automatically mean being wrong. Because the crowd possesses an incredible power over the human mind. It can influence perception, shape beliefs, control behavior. And under the right circumstances, it can convince ordinary people to ignore their instincts, silence their doubts, and follow paths they never intended to take. But there is still one question left unanswered. If conformity is so deeply rooted in human nature, is independent thinking even possible? Can people truly resist the pull of the crowd? And what separates those who blindly follow from those who find the strength to think for themselves? The answer may reveal one of the most important psychological lessons a person can ever learn. If there is one lesson hidden inside every story of conformity, every failed prediction, every social panic, and every historical disaster, it is this: the crowd is not always wrong, but the crowd is never a substitute for thinking. Yet this is something many people struggle to accept. Deep down, we want certainty. We want reassurance that our choices are correct. We want confirmation that we are moving in the right direction. And one of the easiest ways to find that reassurance is to look around and see what everyone else is doing. If enough people believe something, support something, or follow a particular path, it feels safer to do the same. But safety and truth are not the same thing. Sometimes they move together. Sometimes they move in completely opposite directions. The individuals who resist harmful conformity are often misunderstood. People imagine them as fearless rebels who never care what others think. In reality, they experience the same psychological pressures as everyone else. They feel the discomfort of disagreement. They feel the fear of rejection. They feel the anxiety that comes with standing apart from the group. The difference is not that they lack fear. The difference is that they have learned how to act despite it. They understand that discomfort is not always a sign that something is wrong. Sometimes, discomfort is simply the price of independent thought. This is one of the hardest lessons a person can learn, because the human mind constantly searches for social validation. We want approval. We want belonging. We want to know that others agree with us. There is nothing unusual about these desires. They are part of being human. The problem begins when the need for acceptance becomes stronger than the need for truth. When that happens, people stop asking whether something is correct and start asking whether it is popular. They stop evaluating ideas on their merits and begin evaluating them based on how many people support them. Gradually, the crowd becomes the source of authority. The irony is that many people believe they are independent thinkers while unconsciously following the opinions of those around them. They assume they reach their conclusions through logic and reason, Yet many of their beliefs were shaped by family, culture, social groups, media, and countless other influences. This does not mean their beliefs are wrong. It simply means that genuine independent thinking is far rarer than most people realize. It requires effort, it requires self-awareness, and most importantly, it requires the willingness to question not only other people's assumptions, but your own as well. True independent thinking is not about rejecting everything the crowd believes. That would simply be another form of conformity. If a person automatically opposes every popular opinion, they are still allowing the crowd to control their thinking. They are merely reacting in the opposite direction. Genuine independence means evaluating ideas based on evidence rather than popularity. It means being willing to agree with the crowd when the crowd is right and disagree when the crowd is wrong. It means letting reality guide your conclusions instead of social pressure. This sounds simple in theory, but it becomes incredibly difficult in practice. Imagine discovering that a belief shared by everyone around you is mistaken. Imagine realizing that friends, colleagues, family members, or an entire online community have embraced something that doesn't hold up under scrutiny. Speaking up can feel risky. Staying silent feels easier. This is the moment where character is tested. Not when everyone agrees with you, but when they don't. Not when truth is popular, but when it isn't. History remembers the people who were willing to stand alone because those individuals often changed the course of society. Scientists challenged accepted knowledge. Reformers challenged injustice. Inventors challenged conventional wisdom. Whistleblowers challenged powerful institutions. None of these people succeeded because the crowd supported them from the beginning. In many cases, the crowd opposed them. Yet progress often depends on those rare individuals who are willing to question what everyone else accepts. Perhaps the most fascinating thing about conformity is that it creates the illusion that everyone agrees. In reality, many crowds are far less united than they appear. Countless people stay silent because they assume they are alone. They look around, see apparent agreement, and suppress their doubts. Meanwhile, others are doing exactly the same thing. The result is a false consensus, where everyone believes everyone else is convinced. One person speaks up, then another, and suddenly it becomes clear that the crowd was never as certain as it seemed. This is why questioning matters so much. Questions break illusions. Questions expose assumptions. Questions create space for truth to emerge. A crowd can survive disagreement. What it cannot survive forever is reality. Eventually, facts have a way of resurfacing. Contradictions become harder to ignore. False beliefs begin to crack. The problem is that by the time this happens, enormous damage may already have been done. The greatest danger of herd mentality is not that it makes people foolish, it is that it makes people stop thinking. Once individuals begin outsourcing their judgment to the group, they become vulnerable to manipulation, misinformation, and poor decisions. The crowd becomes a substitute for personal responsibility. Instead of asking, "Is this true?" they ask, "Do other people believe this?" Instead of asking, "Is this right?" they ask, "What is everyone else doing?" And in that moment, independent thought quietly disappears. The uncomfortable truth is that every person watching this video is susceptible to these forces. No one is completely immune. Intelligence does not eliminate conformity. Education does not eliminate conformity. Experience does not eliminate conformity. The desire to belong is deeply rooted in human nature. The goal is not to become immune to social influence. That may be impossible. The goal is to become aware of it. Awareness creates choice. Once you recognize the pull of the crowd, you can begin deciding whether that pull deserves to be followed. So, the next time you find yourself agreeing with a popular opinion, pause for a moment. Ask yourself why. Is it because the evidence convinced you? Or is it because everyone around you seems convinced already? The next time you feel pressure to stay silent, ask yourself what exactly you are afraid of. And the next time the crowd appears absolutely certain about something, remember one simple fact. history is filled with crowds that were completely convinced and completely wrong. Because the ultimate lesson of conformity is not that crowds are dangerous. Crowds can achieve extraordinary things. They can inspire change, cooperation, and progress. The real lesson is that truth and popularity are not the same thing. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. And the responsibility of every individual is to know the difference. In the end, the greatest test of independent thinking is not whether you can stand with the crowd when it is right. It is whether you can stand apart from it when it is wrong. That moment may never make you popular. It may never make you comfortable. But it may reveal something far more important: whether your beliefs truly belong to you.